Hello and welcome to another Python tutorial. So today's video, we are going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to focus on web scraping. So we're going to see how we can use the Win32 COM library along with the beautiful soup library to take some URLs that exist in our Excel workbook and then go and fetch all the links that belong to that particular website. So basically the page that we land on, we want to go and fetch all the URL links or just links in general that belong to that particular page. And so actually I already have an Excel workbook all opened up for us. And at the top, you can see that there's three URLs. One is for Apple, one is for CNN, and then one is for CNBC. The goal would be basically to go, for example, to the Apple website and to go and fetch all the links that belong on this website. Now, the links are basically denoted in the HTML code as an A tag. So if you ever want to see what the HTML code looks like behind a website, you just right click if you're in Chrome, and then you can do inspect. And then basically what happens is if you select this little element right here, it will let you hover over it, and then it will take you to the HTML code. And then if you hover over the link, you'll notice that it has an A tag, and then inside that A tag is an href. So that's the actual link that it goes to. So for this example, it would go to apple.com, and then it adds this little extra section to it. So that's what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be able to go and get all those links and then store them in our Excel workbook real time. So basically making a nice little web scraping program without too much effort. So with that being said, let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to import our libraries. Like always, there's going to be a couple. First one will be BS4. This is for beautiful soup. From the BS4 library, we're going to import beautiful soup. And so this is going to be our beautiful soup object. This is basically going to house all of our HTML content and make a nice little framework for us to iterate over this content and grab the components that we want. So that's that library. The next one is going to be from urllib.request. We're going to import request, and then we're also going to import URL open. The request module will allow us to request that little link. The URL will open the URL in our window. Now we're not going to actually see it in a sense, but basically what this will do is allow us to go and fetch the content, so the actual HTML code, and then we'll take that HTML code and store it in a beautiful soup object. Okay, and then from this one, all we need is the Win32 library. So we're going to say import Win32 .com.client. So this will allow us to work with our COM objects that exist in Excel. And so the first thing that we need to do is get our Excel application. This should look very familiar for all those people who have seen the other videos. I'm going to create a new variable, Excel app. Set that equal to Win32 COM.client. We'll do early binding. So we'll do generate cache, ensure dispatch, and then we'll pass through the program ID that belongs to our Excel application. So this will create a new Excel application. Well, it won't really create it for us, but it will grab our active instance in our example. And then again, just to prove that to you. Oh, good thing I ran it. Oh, there's not an S at the end. It's request. My apologies. Okay, and then now we can see that there's our application instance for us. So everything seems to be working up until this point. And so we'll go and get our worksheet. Now I'll do something a little bit different today. We'll create a new variable, call it worksheet, and we'll set this equal to our Excel application. And then we'll go into the active sheet object, and sorry, not object, property. So the active sheet property. And then here, if I print it out, we can see that as a worksheet instance. So really all this is doing is taking the sheet that I'm currently on inside my Excel application. So sheet 1. Okay, now that I have that, I need to define my range of cells that contain my URLs. Well, if we go back to my Excel workbook, it's from A1 to C1. So I'll get that range of cells and then call the value property in order to get the values that belong to it. So we'll define our range of cells. We'll say range of URLs to make it a little bit more intuitive. So we'll say URL underscore list equals worksheet dot range. I want to make sure I capitalize that. And we're going to say from A1 to C1, and then we'll call the value property. And what this will turn back to us is a tuple within a tuple. So that's fine for right now, but we are going to have to go and actually get these URLs. So what I really need to do is I really need to get the first element from my nested tuple. This will return finally the tuple that contains the URLs. So we'll do that in the next section though. So now that we're here, the first thing that we're going to need is we're going to need to define a section initializer. At least that's kind of how I like to think about it, because what I'm going to want to do is go to this column, make a request, get all the links, dump it into this column, move on to the next section, which contains this column, grab that URL, make the request, dump all the URLs, then move on to the next section. So I kind of needed a little bit of a helper in order for me to do this. So we'll define a section initializer, and I'll set this equal to 1, so column 1. And then now that I've defined that, I can actually move on to the next section where we loop through each element in our URL list. So we're going to loop through each URL in our URL list. And so we're going to say for URL in URL underscore list, and then we're going to go to the first element of our URL list. Remember, it's a nested tuple, so this will return, this little section right here will return this. And then now we can iterate over this. And so we're going to say, hey, for each URL in this little tuple, let's go and do the fun stuff. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to request the URL. And then from here, we'll basically open the URL as well. And then we will actually initialize another list to store some of the information. So request the URL and initialize the list that will store the links, basically. Well, one of the lists, unfortunately. So the first thing we're going to do is we'll create a new variable called request, and then we will call request object. We'll pass through our URL, and then we'll get the HTML page or the content, and we'll do that by calling the URL open, and then we'll pass through the request that we made. And then from here, we'll define a new variable called column list. This will be an empty list. And so basically what I'm doing is I'm going to create this big list, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into that list and add another list to it. The reason I have to do this is that if I put all of my information into one list, it would be like I'm putting it all in a single row. So you notice how when I pulled this initial one up here, it was a list within a list, or sorry, a tuple within a tuple. The outer tuple defines the column, and then the inner tuple defines the row. That's how we need to think about it. So here I'm defining an outer column, which will define my outer list that will define my column, and then I'm going to define an inner list that will define my row. So that's why I'm doing that. Okay, so now that I've done this, let's go and actually get the HTML content. And so what I'll do is I'll create a new variable called soup. This will store all that HTML content, and we'll set this equal to BAUTIFL, and then soup, and then we'll say HTML underscore page, and then we need to define a parser. So how do we parse this information? Well, lucky for us, it is HTML, so we'll just define our HTML parser. And then from here, it's basically going to send back all this, content. It's a bunch of code. It's basically all the code that we would see right in here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to find certain tags within inside of this HTML code. Now the tags that I'm looking for all start with A, so the A tags. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say, basically we're going to loop through each one of those tags. We're going to go and get the link that belongs to it, put it into a new list, and then put that list into our column list. So here we'll loop through each, and I'll put in parentheses, a tag. Grab the link and store it in the list. And we'll say for link in, we'll call our soup content. We'll call the find all method. We'll pass through the tag that I want to find. In this case, it's a tag. And then now that we're going to loop through each one of those tags, I'm going to create a new list called the row list. And then from here, I'm going to say, okay, for that row list, when you find the tag, append it, go to the link, call the get method, and then get the href that belongs to that a tag. The href contains the actual link. So the href contains the link. And now that I've stored that in my list, it will do that for each one. And then from here, I'm going to say, okay, now for my column list, append that list and add the row list. And then from here, now we can take that list and dump it into Excel. And now when we dump information into Excel, we need to define a starting cell and an ending cell. And then we'll just dump the values into that range of cells. And so here we'll dump the URLs in the proper section. And so the first thing we're going to do is we'll define a start cell. This will equal the active worksheet that we're on. We'll go into the cells object. We'll start at row 2. Remember, row 1's already taken. We'll start at row 2. And then, well, which column are we working with? Well, it's just the one column that we are in our section initializer. So the first section is column 1. So our starting cell will be A2. It will be this one. Now that I've done that, I've defined my starting cell, and let's define our end cell. Again, the worksheet object will go into the cells object, and then it will be row 2 plus the length of my column list. Because remember, my column list is going to contain all of my rows. And now that I have that, I'll have to specify, okay, now I know the ending row. What's the ending column? Well, it's still going to be the column that we are in our section initializer. And then from here, we'll call our Excel app. We'll go into the range object. We'll define the start cell. We'll define the end cell. We'll call the value property, and that will simply equal our column list. Now, what we're going to have to make sure is that now when we go to the next URL that we move to the next column. So we have to make sure to initialize, or sorry, more increment our initializer. And so we'll say, hey, section init equals plus equal 1. Okay, so I'm going to snap this over here. Let's run it and see what we get. There we go. So it looks like it went and did exactly what we were expecting it to. It went through, and for each one of those URLs, it got all the links to them. And so, kind of to prove that to you guys, these are all active links. Now, some of them go to nothing that's really useful to us, but it is at least showing kind of the capabilities of that beautiful soup of module. So it's very neat. It's neat that we can actually go in there and actually go and get the information that we want. Now, something I am going to do just so you guys kind of understand a little bit more of what I was doing, I want to kind of demonstrate some stuff to you. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to dump it anymore. I'm just going to simply actually go through the list. Now, what I do want to show you is this column list, because I think a lot of people kind of get a little bit confused when they're seeing that, like, hey, you're going to this column list and then you're adding another list within that list. Let's take a look and see what happens when we do that. What's going on? There we go. So as you can tell, there's this outer list, right? That outer list is your column in a sense. This inner list is your row. So really, this is row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5, and so on and so on. But that's basically what we're doing, is we're creating this outer list, which is all of your columns, and then your inner list is your row. So if you wanted to, you could add more elements to this inner row or this row list. But what you'd have to do is you'd have to make sure that your range is recognizing that fact. Because if you're expanding it, but you're only specifying the first column, but it's really 3 columns wide, it's only going to show the first column of that 3-column list. Otherwise, it's going to sit there and just cut everything off. So it's very important that you understand that the reason I'm doing that outer list is my outer list is my columns, my inner list is that row for that particular column. So it is very important that you understand that. And then something, I guess that might be a little bit interesting for you guys to look at is that soup find all A. What does that actually bring back to us? It's thinking. Perfect. So this is another list within a list. So potentially, there actually might be a way where you could just go and actually dump this list inside of Excel. But the problem is it's showing all the HTML for these particular links. And that doesn't make sense a lot of times. Sometimes we just want the link. I don't want all this extra junk that comes along with each one of these A tags. And so that's why I'm calling this get href, is I'm saying, hey, forget about the other stuff. Just give me the link and then store that link in the list. So all this did was it found all the tags that existed in my HTML content that had an A tag, and then each is basically created a list of all of those of A tag elements. And then all we're doing is we're iterating through this list, getting the link, and then storing that link into another list that we can easily plop into Excel with all the extra garbage in a sense. So I just wanted to kind of give you guys insight to really understand why I built it that way. There kind of is a method to the madness. This was what I found to be the quickest way of doing it, and one that kind of made a little bit more sense. So with that being said, I am going to finish up the video. We are going to have more on this topic, but I think this is just kind of a nice way to introduce us to the topic and getting us comfortable working with just a basic request, which is usually, hey, I want to find all the links on a particular page. I can't tell you how many times people have asked me to do that. So I think this is a good introduction topic. I also did want to update you guys. So the GitHub is finally up. It's exciting, I know. Where is it? There. I had to bring it up for a second. Okay. So if you go to Sigma Coding YouTube, you will see the GitHub. It is available. There's some links to some other stuff. If you go to the website, keep in mind the website is not technically finished yet. You can see it, but please don't sign up or anything like that. And then I also kind of go over what kind of the main tutorials are. If you follow these links, it will take you to the different departments within, components inside my GitHub. And then I also have some external resources if you guys are interested in reading about them. But then the kind of the logic behind it is so say for example, you want to go into VBA, you would see it kind of broken out by the major categories. And then inside of these, you would see the individual code modules. And so these are codes that I've done in some videos. Some of them are not ones that I've had videos on, but I did want you guys to have access to them. So feel free to take them, feel free to use them. I don't care. You don't have to do anything special. But this is kind of all the code that I've kind of built up until this point. I think there's still a little bit more I have to add, but this is pretty much the bulk of it, at least for Excel. So there's a VBA component for each of the major applications. Excel has a lot of stuff, and that's even broken down further into pivot tables, Power Pivot, Power Query, all that kind of fun stuff. And then we have, I'm sure the Python people will be happy about this, Python VBA. So this one I'm still working on. I'm going to have some links to the videos just so people have an easy time following along. But all the Python stuff are in Jupyter notebooks. And so these are kind of just like, I guess, little lessons in a sense. Sometimes they load, sometimes they don't. This one looks like it's not going to load because if it takes a long time, it tends not to load. Yeah, see? So that's unfortunate. If you ever want it, what you can do is you can just go to the raw. So if you just click raw, you can always save as or something like that. It works fine. That's what I've done in the past. I will also put up the actual Python modules themselves just in case there's some issues there. But, like I said, feel free to use it, go down, do all that kind of fun stuff. All right, now I have accessing the model, creating the Python formulas, constants, and enumerations. This will be web scraping. And then I think I have one more that I need to put up soon. This is the one for the Python formula one. So the one video where people really like that, where it's like, hey, we can create Python formulas inside of Excel. I put that up there as well. So this is here for you guys to use. They're resources. Like I said, feel free to use them. Why have to go out and search it if it's already here, right? All right, so just wanted to share that. So thanks again for watching, guys. We will see you in the next video.